Hey, what's up? Leroy from NoiseGate. Now, it's no secret around NoiseGate head office that the KeyStep Pro is in fact my favorite sequencer for hardware and drum machine of all time. And hopefully, by the end of this video, it'll be yours too. KeyStep Pro is awesome for sequencing sounds from your digital audio workstation, a complex modular synth setup, and traditional MIDI synths and drum machines. In this video, I'm gonna cook up a bit of a house groove, sequencing some sounds from a drum rack in Ableton Live. I'm gonna program some chords using the Minilog XD, create a little synth line with this little NTS1, and I'm gonna create a bass line with the Zero Coast synth module. And it's all gonna end up sounding a bit like this. Now, just quickly before I move on, Arturia have just announced a firmware update for the KeyStep Pro. It's up to version 2.0 now, which has brought forward a bunch of really great workflow features. So I'll kind of touch on these as I go throughout the video. Sweet, so let's start where every good tune should, and let's program a beat. All right, so starting with the drums. But before I move forward, I'll just give you a quick overview of kind of the workflow of how KeyStep works. We have 4 tracks of independent sequencing. Track 1 is my dedicated drum sequencer. Track 2 is, in this instance, programming my chords from the Minilog XD. Track 3 is sending MIDI to my NTS1. And track 4, we have the gate and pitch mod sent out of voice 4 into my Zero Coast synthesizer. All right, back to the drums. This is a really great way of sequencing drums. Just before I get started, I'm just going to navigate to the utility menu, hit MIDI channel, scroll down to track output 1 in the MIDI channels, just to, this is where you can define the MIDI output. And so this is going out on MIDI channel 10, and it's being received on MIDI channel 10 in my drum rack in Ableton Live. Okay, so this keeps it all nice and tidy. Just going to select a different tempo. Let's move up to 125 because we're not mucking around. And that's my kick drum. So now I can sort of play and sequence all of these drum sounds independently in the sequencer here. This is my sequence length. It's currently set by default to 16 steps, which is 1 bar, which is where I'm going to keep it for now. But if you wanted to increase it, you can obviously just press these little buttons to increase the step length. All right, so I'm just going to start entering some steps. 1, 5, 9, 13. 4 to the floor, because it's house. Nice. So it's pretty easy to just sort of create a groove from here based on this workflow, just by simply selecting another sound. So we'll go with the clap, put it on the 5 and the 13, that's the upbeat, and so on and so forth. There is another way though. You can obviously just press record and press play, and you can enter in sounds in real time. And you also have a metronome, which will give you a 1 bar count in, so you can sort of, prepare your pattern. So I'm gonna lay down some closed hats, shift metronome to turn it on, press the record, and when I press play, it'll give me a 1 bar count in, and the metronome will be played from this little itty bitty speaker right there. See? Right there. Itty bitty. Cool, now I'll move to my next sound, which is just an open hat. Cool. Now, just going back to these closed hi-hats, it might be a good way to show how to change the velocity levels of individual drum sounds per step. So I'm going to change the velocity levels of these closed hats, and all I need to do is select a step and change the parameter. Because I don't want all of my drum sounds to be the exact same velocity. I want them to have a little bit of groove by changing the velocity levels. And what's really cool about this, every time I select a different step, the LEDs on that parameter actually show you what the where the velocity level is set to. Now I'm going to add a couple more elements to this. Add this little snare right there, change the velocity level of that, and grab this and put that right there. And just change the velocity level. Now, I just want to add a little bit of swing to this groove before I move forward as well. Now, there's two ways of, well, there's only one way of entering swing, but you can do it in independent of each track, or you can assign swing globally. So I just want to add swing just to this track as it is. So I'm going to hold the shift button and I'll turn the swing dial. And so that's just going to add some swing just to track 1, which is my drums. I'll increase it to about 57%. Nice, sounding pretty cool. So what I want to do now is I've just got this one pattern that's 1 bar long, and I want to duplicate this and I want to add some more elements to it because I want to create a progression. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press copy pattern and select pattern 1, and then I'm going to hit paste pattern and paste it into the next pattern slot. Okay. Now I've got 2 patterns. When I press the pattern button, see I've got 2 patterns, 1 and 2. And I can toggle between them using these 2 little arrows here, which is really, really handy. Now currently pattern 2 just is identical to pattern 1, but I'm going to add some rides to this pattern. That's not a ride. Right either. That's a ride right there. So I'm just going to manually record these in real time. And might also lay down some rim shots. A cool way of actually doing things is just to be really random with the sequencer though. So I might just select the rim shot and just punch it in randomly and see kind of what comes up. Cool way of experimenting with the KeyStep Pro sequencer to come up with patterns that you might not necessarily have thought of. Might just drop the velocity levels of a few of these notes. Cool. Now I'm just going to duplicate this one more time. Copy that pattern, paste it to the next pattern slot. So now I've got 3 patterns. But in this pattern, pattern 3, I'm going to take the kick drum out and I'm going to add a snare roll. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop the velocity level of every second snare hit to give me a bit of a shuffle. So don't mind me as I go. And now if you were going to be doing this over a 64-step sequence, you could obviously just do it over 16 steps and copy those 16 steps 4 times, so you don't have to manually do this for every 16 steps. All right, there you go. So the dropped velocity on every second snare hit gives me that shuffle in that snare ride. So cool, and so this is really handy for programming a drum beat and creating a progression. Now let's move on to the chords. So that's track 2. So I want to program some chords, but I am really useless at playing chords using the keys. However, fortunately for me, KeyStep Pro has some useful features like the chord mode, which means I can play chords just using or just triggering one note. So this is the Minilog XD. I'm just going to hit shift and press the tire rest button, which will activate chord mode. And what I can do is I can program any chord shape that I like and use one key to trigger that. And what's really great is the LEDs light up and show you which note is being played in that chord. Now, with the firmware update 2.0, it actually allows you to record these chords into the sequencer. Now I'm going to extend the length of this pattern to 64 steps because I want a 2-bar loop. That sounds pretty good. So I'm just going to hit the record button, turn the metronome on, and it'll give me a 1 bar counting when I press play, and I can just lay down these chords. Now you might notice that that very first chord there, it didn't actually capture that chord, it's only just playing one note. So to get around that, I'm just going to turn that off and just hold down that step and enter in a chord. And hold that step down again and just increase the gate length of that just so it sustains that note for a little longer. Now with version 2 as well of the firmware update, it's brought forward this really nifty feature for editing chords. If I press step edit now, I can actually audition each individual chord that's in my sequence just by triggering those notes in the sequence. And I can just scroll throughout the rest of the pattern. So, you know, this would be useful if I wanted to say increase or decrease the velocity just for that first chord, and say increase it for that one. And so on and so forth. Cool, sounds good. When you engage the shift button, all these LEDs light up, and we've got this scale function here. So we can actually assign all the notes to only play notes that are in a particular scale. So say we've got major, minor, Dorian, etc. So currently I've just got it on chromatic mode. I'm just going to leave it there, which is fine for now. But it's really useful to be able to quantize those notes to those scales. Cool, let's take a look at the arpeggiator. I'm going to move over to track 3 now and just play some sounds from the NTS1. This is a super sweet little synth. The voice engine from this is basically just the digital multi-engine from the Minilog XD. It sounds super digital and really gritty, and you get some really cool sounds out of it. So I'm going to, rather than use the sequence mode, I'm going to use the arpeggiator and start arpeggiating some notes. One of the cool things about the new firmware update is it allows you to play the arpeggiator without the sequencer running. Beforehand, you had to have the sequencer running to be able to hear the arpeggiator, which was kind of annoying because you just want to be able to hear what you're doing without having to mute everything else. If I hold shift, I can sort of change my arpeggiator pattern, so I can switch it to say down and change the arpeggiation rate or time division to any of these 4 different arpeggiators, and you can assign the scale and all that kind of thing as well. Cool, and also what you can do now is you can record this arpeggiator directly into the sequencer. I'm just going to press record, turn the metronome on, and hit start and record this into the sequence. Again, I'm just going to be using a short 16-step sequence for this one. Now you'll notice once I've recorded those arpeggiation into the sequencer, it actually stops. That's because I need to switch over back to the sequence mode, which will play all of those notes that I've just recorded in. thing with this is once the notes are in there, you can kind of just be a little bit random and just sort of start turning some notes on to come up with some different ideas. And then once you've done that, you can sort of start mucking around with some of the extra little features that you get within the sequencer. So say I could hold the shift button and say randomize the octave range. I could nudge the notes left or right. So I might just nudge these this way. What's going on? Now I might just duplicate this pattern real quick. I'm just going to go copy pattern 1 and paste pattern to 2 and switch it to pattern 2, and then I might just randomize the octaves again and nudge it along. And then what I can do is I can chain those two patterns together. So go chain, hold those two patterns, and it will just cycle between pattern 1 and pattern 2. So, you know, you can come up with some really cool ideas just based on this sort of like sequencing workflow. All right, so now moving on to the last part of this track, I've got this zero coast synth module here, and with the gate and the pitch being set into it. And I might just sort of use the Arpeggiate again to come up with, you know, another idea. Cool, just gonna lay that down. Sweet, so the last thing I wanted to talk about real quickly was just this control channel, this control lane that the KeyStep Pro has. Basically what this is used for is it allows you to send MIDI CC messages from the 5 parameters here. So this is really useful if you wanted to say, use one of these knobs to control a filter on your hardware synthesizer. Or control one of the envelopes on another synth or whatever else. In this instance, what I've got it doing is I have it mapped to effect sends in Ableton Live, so I can apply reverb or delay effects to some of my synths. So if I press track 2 here and press the control, you'll see that this channel will flash, and if I turn this knob, it will increase the effect send volume for these chords. One of the really cool things about this is you're actually able to record this as automation, so it will kind of like, record your parameter movement throughout your sequence. And I have the same thing set up for the other elements. So track 3, press the control mode, and this get parameter here is set to send volume to the effect return for the NTS1. And same for the zero coast. Oops, I'm gonna press that. So this is great for if you want to incorporate some send and return effects into, say, like a live of performance, or if you want to, do some sort of like step modulation for, modulating a parameter on another external hardware synthesizer. Also with the drums as well, it's handy to know that you can actually mute individual elements in your sequence. So if you hold down the mute button and select a sound, you can mute that sound in your sequence. So this right here, you can see it's being muted with the LED, and that's just muting my kick drum. Cool, so I hope that sort of helps with showing you how the KeyStep works with sequencing a whole range of different things. We've got some traditional hardware synths, we've got a little modular setup, and we're sequencing sounds within my digital audio workstation. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you get a lot out of it. Make sure you bang any comments in the comments below if you have any questions, and we'll see you next time.